Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is Sabir, pronouns he, him, and I direct events here at the Strand. Before we launch into a discussion of Melody Godfred's debut poetry book, Self-Love Poetry, and her forthcoming book, The ABCs of Self-Love, I'd like to share a little bit of history about the Strand. The Strand was founded in 1927 by Benjamin Bass over on 4th Avenue's Book Row. Stretching from Union Square to Astor Place, Book Row gradually dwindled from 48 bookstores until, after over 94 years, the Strand is the sole survivor, now run by third-generation owner Nancy Bass Wyden. We want to thank all of you for your support. Without our loyal community of book lovers, booksellers, and the time of authors like Melody and Valerie, we wouldn't be here today. And we so truly appreciate all of you. Tonight, we are thrilled to have Melody Godfred with us for the launch of her debut poetry book, Self-Love Poetry for Thinkers and Feelers, and her forthcoming book, The ABCs of Self-Love, A Simple Guide to Loving Yourself, Reclaiming Your Worth, and Changing Your Life. Melody Godfred is a self-love philosopher. As a poet, author, and entrepreneur, she is devoted to empowering people to love themselves and transform their lives. She's the founder of the global self-love movement, Fred and Far, and creator of the self-love Pinky Ring. Her poetry has been featured by Oprah Magazine and Today with Hoda and Jenna for its wisdom and ability to deeply resonate and uplift. Melody has shared her career, business, parenting, and women's empowerment advice on Forbes, Inc., Bustle, HuffPost, Motherly, Thrive Global, among others, and has spoken at the Teen Vogue Summit and the Massachusetts Conference for Women. Joining Melody in conversation tonight is Valerie June Hockett. Valerie June Hockett is a singer, songwriter, and multi-instrumentalist from Tennessee. She has been hailed by the New York Times as one of America's most intriguing, fully formed new talents. She has recorded 2 critically acclaimed, best-selling solo albums and has also written songs for legendary artists such as Mavis Staples and the Blind Boys of Alabama. Her debut poetry collection, Maps for the Modern World, released in April 2021. When she's not touring, June splits her time between Tennessee and New York. And so, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Melody and Valerie to the stage.
I'm Valerie. Nice to meet you, Melody.
I'm Melody. Very nice to meet you, Valerie. And so nice to meet everyone here.
Yes, thank you, Sabir, for that beautiful introduction. I mean, it was stellar. So we really appreciate Strand for having us. And I want to go ahead and get this started by asking a question about what are these 2 different books that you've released? I'm holding them up, but I want to hear straight from you. What are they?
So Self-Love Poetry is a collection of 200 poems. And in a lot of ways, it embodies me coming to terms with all parts of myself and deciding how I want to feel and move through the world. So it has poems that will resonate with left brain thinkers. They're logical gut punches of wisdom. It has poems that are for right brain feelers that are evocative and deeply emotional. And together, the hope is that when you read these poems, just as they activated the whole person in me, I hope that they will activate the whole person in the reader and allow them to love themselves fully. And the ABCs of self-love is a guide to reaching that place where you can love all parts of yourself. And it came about after several years of me leading a self-love movement and constantly being asked the question, I'm ready to love myself, but I'm not sure where to begin. And I realized that even though we've been taught so much and we have access to so much information these days, the question of how do I love myself is one that hasn't really been addressed before. And my hope is that with this book, and also with self-love poetry, that the path forward on the self-love journey becomes a little bit more clear.
Oh, brilliant answer. You're known as the self-love philosopher. Even it says it on the bottom of the book. What does this title mean to you?
So it's funny. I worked with a coach about 2 years ago. And at that time, I knew that I wanted to start writing and I knew I wanted to start shifting my life's work from being more business oriented to being more creative. And I needed a way to identify myself really for myself. How do I own my identity? How do I make sense of how I'm spending my time, where my heart is? And I realized that throughout my life, and especially lately, what I love to do is to ask questions and explore the answers with other people. And that's really what philosophy is all about. It's not necessarily about having the answers, it's about having the courage to answer them and inviting others to participate in that same loving inquiry. So that's where self-love philosopher came from. It was a way for me to make sense of myself, and also to help people understand what my commitment is to. And I've been really proud of the work that I've been able to put forward to make that make sense for people. Because at first you hear self-love philosopher and you're like, what is that? But I think you get into the book and it becomes really clear.
Yes, it definitely does. I love the way the book is laid out with the left brain thinkers on one
Mhm.
side of every page and the right brain feelers on the other side of the page. So you have something for every mind.
Yes.
How do you celebrate yourself?
For me, I've learned that like the first step of celebrating myself is to be mindful about where I allow my thoughts to go. This past year has been a perfect example of that. I got a book deal. I mean, this is a lifelong dream of mine. I grew up in bookstores like the Strand. I have wanted nothing more than to have my book on the shelves of these bookstores. And yet it's so easy when you're an overachiever, when you're a perfectionist, to immediately move on to the next thing where it's like, okay, I got the book deal. Now what? Like, what is the next thing I'm going to do? And so for me, celebrating myself is to really stop and be like, this is an extraordinary moment of my life. Yes, your face, 2 books in bookstores. And that for me, the pause is my power. The pause is my moment of celebration. It's recognizing that who I am is enough in this moment without anything else having to happen and without needing to worry about what comes next. So it's about being joyfully present. That is my current mode of celebration.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
What's the most challenging thing that you've done to remain true to your authentic self?
Oh, great question. I'm kind of in the process of it now. I'm having to rethink my career again for the third or fourth time. I started my career as a litigation attorney. So I was a lawyer first. And about a year in, after having many sleepless nights and out of body experiences where I kind of gazed down on myself and wondered, is this really how I'm going to spend my life? I walked away from what was a very safe path. And I went from that into entrepreneurship. I started 2 different companies. And becoming an author after you've established yourself as an entrepreneur and you have these customers who count on you and you do this work that's meaningful, it's hard to put a pin in that and say, okay, I'm going to do something else now, and to walk away from it again because it doesn't feel like it's the truest expression of my purpose on this planet. So for me now, these books are my purpose. They're my highest calling. And even though it's really hard to say no to things that are comfortable and familiar and meaningful, I know that the greatest work I can do comes from an authentic place. And that's what I'm choosing to do by focusing on writing.
Ah. Well, there's a quote in the well, it's on the back of Self Love,
Yeah.
um, ABCs of Self Love, and it's also at the very beginning. I've written all in the book and just notes as I read it, and y'all will want to do that too. But I'll go ahead and read this quote, and it says, so many years of education, yet nobody ever taught us how to love ourselves and why it's so important. And the quote is listed as unknown.
Yeah.
Who said this? Where
I,
did you find this quote? It's
God, I
so
hope whomever it is just pops up after this webinar and like helps me update the attribution in future versions. It's an Instagram meme, and I have tried so hard to find the source. And while many conflicting people claim to have originated it, there is no definitive source. Everyone has simply been cycling this meme, which is graffiti on a wall that says this phrase. That's the original expression of this thought. And it's funny because it's such a obvious point and it's such a universal idea that once you hear it, you can't imagine why we haven't been taught how to love ourselves. Like, we have had so many years of education, especially me. I went all the way through graduate school, and nowhere along the way did someone ask me to check in with myself and learn how to live with myself and how to move through the world with integrity and love and self-worth. And this book, The ABCs of Self-Love, is hopefully going to change that, not just for, women like you or me, but also for younger girls like my daughters who are 9 years old and haven't yet started to disassociate from their worth, or young men who haven't yet had to question whether it's okay to be vulnerable. It's really for everyone so that they can go into their futures as adults or into their futures as super adults from a place of being okay with who they are and recognizing that to love yourself is not selfish. In fact, it is the portal to all love. It is the foundation of all love. And that is my hope with this book, is to make it as inclusive as possible so that everyone who can read it and feel at home within its pages.
Wow. It seems like I wanted you to be the voice behind it. So when I wrote in my book, I just scratched out unknown and I wrote melody.
Thank you.
It's so powerful to hear those words from
Thank
you.
you.
When I think about the idea of self-love, it really connects to me to the threads that I find in spiritual texts and in all religions. There's like this beautiful light that connects all religions that is a common theme. And that theme is self-love to me. It's not a new idea. Why do you think we need to be continuously reminded again and again of this powerful and beautiful message? Because it's an ancient story. It's
Yes.
a very ancient theme, It's older than definitely my great great grandparents and on. Why do we need to be reminded?
So I'm a firm believer that all of us are on this planet for a reason, and that there's a reason we don't have duplicates. There is a reason you are the only Valerie June that will ever exist, past, present, or future. And I'm the only Melody. Like, that to me is so deliberate that it cannot be by accident. And whoever you think is responsible for that, an energetic force, God, the universe, science, I think that we are all with purpose. We are here for a reason, and that in claiming our authentic selves, we become a living expression of that purpose. The problem is that everything that we see fights against that, because we are taught to embrace perfection, which is the antithesis of authenticity. To be perfect erases all the nuances that make us so special. And I think in our culture, that is the guiding light, is how can we be more perfect? How can we be more productive? How can we stay on the path that's designated as the right path? And that's why I think it's so important to continually remind ourselves of our reason for being here, which is to be ourselves. And I'll also say that for me, a lot of this came to a head for me when I became a mother. I had twins who were 6 weeks early, and what they demanded of me, simply to be alive, simply to survive, made me feel like my only purpose was for them. And for a time that was true. But then I woke up one day when they were 2 years old and realized I had left myself back. I didn't know anymore what made me wake up in the morning with a spark. And I think that happens to a lot of people who have children. They start living for someone other than themselves. And I hope that my book gives people a path forward that allows giving to others and giving to yourself to be something that can work in harmony, as opposed to being in opposition with each other. And I've certainly work every day to find that balance, because I think service is a tremendous calling, and we all are being called to serve. but not at the expense of our true selves. And so it's our job to find that balance.
Do you think that over time, through teaching the daughters and the sons and those who are coming after us, generations to come, that we will begin to embrace self love and the philosophy behind it more and more and become naturally conscious of what we already have within us? Do you think it's going to get any easier for us to
Yeah.
really live and embody this truth?
I absolutely do. I think that I'm already seeing that shift. And I think that the old way across the board isn't working anymore. And I think all of us are opening up to the idea that we need things to move forward in a different way. And I think self love is a big part of that equation, as is community. I read a really beautiful quote that talked about how the most radical form of self-care is community care. It's not just about taking care of ourselves, it's about taking care of each other. And I really agree with that. And I think that's what this next chapter will be about. How can we all love ourselves and at the same time care for each other? And from that space, hopefully create a society that feels a little less abrasive and lonely than this one.
Oh, I believe it can happen, and I do think it will begin to be accelerated. That as soon as more and more people embrace and embody this message, that it's just going to be like dominoes across the
Yeah.
planet.
Yeah.
Um, well, moving on, we're going to skip letter A. As you can see, every single page is a letter of the alphabet. And I want to go to letter B, which you chose the word boundaries for letter
Yes.
B. What is a boundary that you're super proud of having in your life and just embracing this one boundary that just changed a lot of things for you? Can you share one?
Yeah. So for me, when I think about boundaries, and I write this in the book, boundaries aren't about what you say no to, they're about what you make space for. And for me, I used to live a very boundless life where everything bled into each other. Work bled into family time, bled into solo time. Everything kind of was mushed together. And as a result, I wasn't present for any of it. I was in this perpetual struggle with myself to always try to find a way not to feel guilty about whatever it was I wasn't doing. So the biggest boundary that I've created in my life is separating all the different aspects of my life and giving it my full attention. So when I walk in the door, if my children are home, I don't work. I mean, I don't check emails, I don't respond to emails. And if I need to, I will leave the room and go somewhere else and let them know that I need, 20 minutes to myself. Whereas the old me used to try to play with my 2-year-old and respond to a customer service inquiry at the same time. And when I did that, everyone would suffer, mostly me, because I felt like I was letting down my son and I was letting down my work and I was not able to enjoy my life. So I think we all have those intersections where we're being pulled in different directions. And until you're willing to set some boundaries, um, every task will win over your presence and enjoyment of the moment that you're in.
Yes, and it also seems as if clear communication is key with those boundaries. Being able to say to your child, okay, I'm going to go for 20 minutes and take care of this so that you can go there and be
Yes.
present, but also be present when you're with them. So,
Yeah.
boundaries with the ability to communicate and
And that's
just,
what I talk about exactly in the letter B. It's like self-worth isn't just knowing what your boundary is, it's having the courage to communicate it. And I've had to set some hard boundaries and have some really awkward communication around it. For example, I had a friend who used to call me at 8 o'clock every morning with bad news. I mean, it was like on clockwork. The first call of the day was this horrible phone call. And even though I loved her, I let her know, like, you can call me for support, but not before 12. Like, it's 12 p.m. You need support. I'm here for you, but it can't happen at 8 a.m. And that was a really hard conversation. But to her credit, she respected it. And it strengthened our bond for her to also realize that I have needs and it's not just a one-way street.
and that you are there for her and you truly love her.
Yes.
You're going to be there. Well, I want to move over to page 17, where you
Mhm.
talk about the four C's and,
Yes.
I mean, 14. And they're clarity, commitment, creation, and community. When you talk about community, I'm really curious. Has it been easy for you to find others who are on the same equal plane and platform as you as far as embracing self love and truly living it and being present? It has been easy, or do you feel like you are alone in this world, woman?
It's amazing. Social media gets such a bad rap, and for good reason. I mean, there's a lot of bad stuff happening over there, but I will also say it is this incredibly powerful tool to connect with people all around the world who share the same, goals, values, intentions as you. And when I created my self-love movement back in 2016, self-love really wasn't a word that people were using back then. But once I started using it, other people started using it and getting really excited about exploring it. And, we connected. And I have people now that I've connected with for over 5 years on social media that I've never met, but they feel like my sisters because we show up for each other in such a deeply honest and consistent way. So I do think we live in a very connected world. And once you're clear, right, that's why clarity is first in the 4 C's. Once you're clear about who you are and what you need, the other steps of commitment, creation, community, they come really naturally, but you have to be clear on what it is that is important to you and be willing to commit to it. And for me, the gift of all of this, of writing these books, of devoting myself to self-love, aside from reclaiming myself and being able to actually enjoy this supremely beautiful life that I have, is that I get to share that journey with other people who are so special and who are equally committed to the self-love journey as I am.
Oh, I love that. I always love looking at my social media feed and seeing the joy and seeing people celebrating life and also sharing that with others, like
Yes.
using our social media for positive messages and for healing. I think
Mhm.
that's one of the most powerful tools, and the way you describe building a community from that base is huge.
Well,
Um,
I'm going to just add one more thing. Like, you really brought a thought to my mind with one of your earlier questions, and you brought it back up right now. You asked me if I think that by teaching our children and ourselves to love ourselves, if we can make a fundamental shift. And, I think we can all agree that generational trauma is very real. I come from generations of trauma on so many different levels, and I feel it in my bones. I feel it in my reactions to certain situations. But what if generational healing is also possible? Like, what if in creating these communities around self love, what if in choosing ourselves and loving ourselves, we fundamentally change our DNA and pass that forward? And that we get to actually be part of generational healing instead of just generational trauma? Like, that is the goal here, is to make that shift. So, I mean, even you having this conversation with me furthers that. So, thank you.
Yes, every thought, every breath, every single moment is constantly being able to move in that direction. And I really love it. I love this beauty of that thought. There's a section on emotional empowerment, and it says, let me find this little section. My question is like, when you're speaking about emotional empowerment, you're talking about how we have the power to shift our perspective and create peace of mind and acceptance within ourselves and within our worlds.
Mhm.
And is our emotional empowerment and that shift, is that solely our responsibility? Is it the individual's responsibility to take a look at the world, the challenges, the toxic environments that can happen, what's happening in entertainment or the news that's heavy and brutal and destructive? Is it our responsibility to take that and to say no and to reject it and to rewrite the story and shift the energy? Is that all our responsibility?
Um, I think our responsibility is deciding how we want to feel. So we cannot overnight change the world. And so if you want to look for reasons to be upset and to embody that toxic energy, all it takes is a click of a button and you will be bombarded by really bad energy. And I think that it's a matter of how do you want to carry that? So yes, we can choose how we're going to carry it. We can also choose what we're going to consume. We also can choose where we perform acts of service to change the world around us so that we aren't simply beholden to the way things have been and we can actually make a change. And we do that together. I don't think it's a solo enterprise. I don't think that isolation is the solution. I think that community is the solution, but from a place of self-love, so that we deliver our wholeness to ourselves. And from that place of wholeness, we walk alongside other whole-souled people to create a new culture. And it's a tall order, and part of the reason why this book is so easy to digest, where it isn't pages and pages of scientific research and prose, and it's full of color and uplifting illustrations, is because this shouldn't feel like homework. The goal of this is to make life easier and lighter and brighter. And I think we all have the capacity to give ourselves that gift of not being in a perpetual doom scroll when we think about our lives.
Oh, yes. There are so many pages of different activities, just so you know, if you're following along here, so that you can just write your ideas, write your thoughts, and write your feelings. And she has prompts and quotes and so many guides and exercises for us to be able to work through some of these issues and thoughts and feelings that we might be having about the world. Um, my next question goes to page 32 in the ABCs of Self-Love.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, does sharing your self-love philosophy, the prompts, and the guides put any pressure on you personally to live up to these ideas? And were you afraid to share any part of this journey? Was it personal at one time and then you had to get the courage to share it with us? How did we get so fortunate to get these
Oh,
gifts from you?
thank you. It was hard at first. One of the very first pieces of writing that I shared publicly about self-love, I wrote a piece called How Self-Love Saved My Marriage. And I shared it on the HuffPost back in 2016. And it got real about how much I was struggling in my marriage and how much I was struggling as a mother, and how I was constantly making everyone around me, especially my husband, feel less than because I was so desperate to control everything. And when you approach your relationships from a place of control, all that you're left with are unmet expectations and profound disappointment instead of companionship and love. And I put that out there. And I remember sharing it with my husband before I published it and being like, are you okay with me sharing with literally the entire world that we are having some serious marriage struggles? And to his credit, he didn't ask me to take out a single line. And I always think about how one day I would like to write a memoir. And this book does have a lot of me in it, but I'm still working my way up to that full level of courage to really own all of it. But I will say what I have found is that the more honest I am about the hardest things, the more I find that people come out of the woodwork and they say, oh my God, me too. And thank you. Just this past weekend on Instagram, I talked about how I'm learning to let go of things because carrying it all has become so hard. And I asked people to share what they need to let go of. And they answered so honestly about things like being angry at their mother, or needing to leave their spouse, or needing to leave their job. And they know I can see who they are. And yet they're brave enough to own their hardest thoughts, their hardest moments. And, it isn't always easy for me to show up in perfect form. Like, I am not a self-love robot. I definitely have periods where I slip, like one of the chapters here is devoted to movement. And what I have found is that's where I struggle the most. I am so cerebral and in my mind, and that's where I live, that sometimes it's hard to remember that I actually feel my best, not when I'm in my mind, but when I'm in motion. And so sometimes like a month will go by and I swear to God, like I don't move faster than like 1 mile per hour. And then other times I'm excellent at movement. And I think part of this book is giving yourself permission to embrace yourself, whether you are meeting your highest goals or simply allowing yourself to rest without judgment.
Girl, I'm with you on that because I love to dance every day. And my rule for the movement is that it does exactly what you've written under the movement, where you speak about how just taking a walk or dancing or doing something
Yeah.
energetic can shift your energy.
Yeah.
So that's my rule. I'll be in a cloud and I say, wait a minute, I haven't put on a song and dance today. And I only have to do 5 minutes or
Yeah.
10 minutes and the energy shifts. How does dance work into your practice? Because you do talk about dancing in both of these books, and I
Yeah.
would love for you to read a poem from your self-love poetry
Yeah.
book, the first one that was out, in regards to dance. But how does dance play in your life?
When I was younger, I had the opportunity to take a dance class when I was, I think, in ninth grade. I had started a new school, and the options for physical education were either dance or PE. And even though I was desperate to join the dance class, they required that you wear a leotard. And I was so self-conscious at that time that I chose PE, and I hated it. And for many years, it put me on this track of choosing athletics when I am not an athlete. I'm a dancer. Like that's the movement that feels intuitive to me, not playing team sports. And it really started from this. I was at this crossroads of, am I going to allow my lack of body positivity? Am I going to allow my shame to dictate this decision? And when I was 14, shame dictated the decision. And now as an adult, it's the opposite. It's like, what can I do for myself that doesn't come from a place of shame, that comes from a place of profound joy? And dance does that for me. It allows me to activate the tips of my fingers. It allows me to connect soulfully with music, which is, I think, ever since childhood, where I feel the most alive. Like, you turn on a song that I like, I get goosebumps from head to toe. I feel like this is like a scientific thing that happens to some people, and I'm lucky enough to have it. So yes, dance is my quick fix for wanting to feel alive. And like you said, it doesn't need to be, for more than even 30 seconds, but the music is loud and the music is right. And I just stop being stagnant for just a few minutes. Everything opens up for me. And to read the poem that you referenced from Self-Love Poetry, it's on page 29. It says, I finally found my rhythm when I realized that even the step backwards were part of the dance.
Wow.
And that for me is the greatest lesson, is life isn't linear and you can't dance only forward. Dance is about moving forward and backwards and side to side and being in your body and embracing that momentum wherever it takes you. So we should have a dance party at the end of this Zoom.
After all, we are so lucky to be in these bodies.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
speaking of dancing and music, you have a beautiful name, Melody.
Yeah.
Are you at all musical?
Yes. I am a musician. I play the piano and I sing. And from a very young age, I was composing and writing songs with lyrics, and self-love poetry was born of that, was born of the lyricist in me and the pianist in me. And music, I think, is such a gift because it activates not just my left brain or my right brain or my body or my mind. It brings all of it to life. And I think it was, divine inspiration on my mother's part when she named me Melody, because if there's one thing that has been the most consistent and profound thing, it's definitely music, is where I feel most at home.
We just thank her so much because your name is so beautiful,
Thank
melody and making music. I only have a couple more questions for you. In the book, both books, meditation is mentioned. Are you a regular meditator, or was it something that happened and started you on a journey of meditation, or how did meditation come into your life?
I was afraid of meditation for a really long time. I thought to myself, are you kidding me? Like, I can't do that. Like, I can sit and listen to music by myself in my headphones for 4 hours, like, if that counts as meditation. Um, I think meditation came to me when nothing else worked. And one of the most profound moments where meditation really saved me is when I had a medical procedure done and I had to be awake for it. And it was incredibly scary and uncomfortable. And I meditated. And what ended up happening during that 45-minute meditation, where I was focusing on my breath and trying to clear my mind and release the fear and tension, is I felt only love and forgiveness. And I started crying in the middle of this procedure, releasing all these feelings that had been pent up in me. And all it took was for me to be unable to walk away from it. Like, I was literally stuck on this table. There was nothing I could do. And things that really needed to be released got released. And that for me is when I turn to meditation. I would love to say it's something I do every day. It's something that I do when I really need that deep, cathartic clarity and release. And I'll be honest, it has never let me down. Anytime I'm seeking, I always find the answer after meditating. And it's really incredible that we have the power to do that for ourselves. And back to that original quote, so many years of education. A lot of this is just coming to the surface now, but I'm so grateful that we're getting resources and tools that make these concepts more accessible, because I don't think I'm the only one who is afraid of meditating.
That's true. My little sister says, I just can't do it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, you can do it. Just a
Yeah.
few moments each day and or whenever you feel it. And
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be sitting meditation. There's so many different ways of meditating. So let's conclude with um my favorite ever, joy. Um, there is a page in the book where you talk about joy, but I would love for you to read this lovely quote
Oh,
on page
yes. My
58, if
favorite
you don't
too.
mind.
So J is for joy. Sometimes I'm a happy ray of sunshine. Sometimes I'm a melancholy beam of moonlight. Happy or sad, I am still whole. I am still worthy. I am still enough. I am still grateful. I am still joyful. I am still me.
On a Saturday afternoon, I was on the couch and it was sunny. And I read that and I was so happy, but I started crying.
Oh,
Have you had that experience, happy tears? I was
yeah.
in happy tears reading those
Oh,
words. I
thank
am
you.
worthy. I am still worthy. Like
Yeah.
the fact of us being worthy of joy and happiness in all of our imperfection, it's huge. And you just did such a beautiful job of writing about happiness and joy in the book. I love that you brought in this section and questioning and talking about Brene Brown saying that we dress rehearse our negatives
Mhm.
and how can we embrace joy. And you just like, to me, to use her quote in the book, it just is beautiful because I equate you with her energy.
Oh,
And
thank you.
I
That's
just
a
was
tough
so happy when I
feedback.
read it. So happy. And the activity in the book around joy, I'm excited for everyone to get to that. I won't tell you what it is. I'm really holding back here,
Yeah.
y'all, because these prompts and guides and activities are so exciting. So you're gonna love it, and you can kind of do things in your own time. Um, well, I think that's those. Let me go back through my questions and see if there was anything else I wanted to ask you. But I think those are all the questions I wanted to ask you.
Thank you, Valerie. They were excellent questions.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you. I'm so excited and honored.
Thank you.
Yep, I think that's all of them.
Well, this provides a perfect moment to transition to our audience questions, which we do have a few of. So our first question is from an anonymous attendee who, and this question is directed at both you, Melody, and you, Valerie. And they ask, what is next for you on your self-love journey? And maybe why don't we begin with Valerie for that one and then go to Melody.
Well, next for me is I this book just came out. It is hot off the press, and I got a copy like so hot off the press that I've written all my notes and underlined all of these lines that she just had beaming with so much energy. But I haven't had time to go and do the prompts and the exercises yet. So I'm looking forward to following through and filling out all of the pages. And I noticed that in some places there are, oh yeah, like on this page here, on page 75, there are a lot of extra pages in the back of the book is what it mentions, because I was like, I'm not gonna be able to write down everything I need to forgive or in like one page. So I'm looking forward to doing that. That's my next step.
I love that. Similarly to Valerie, I am looking forward to starting the new year and actually filling out this book myself, because it's one thing to write it, it's another thing to actually do the work. And so I'm really just this is a dream in the making, having this book, and especially in this illustrated format is something that I really didn't think ever would be possible. So I want to work my way through the book. I'm also working on a new book called The Shift: Poetry for a New Perspective, and that will come out in the fall. So work-wise, I'm working through that and finalizing the poetry. But in terms on a personal level, the next step of my self-love journey is twofold. One is really to commit to health. I think the past few years have been such an awakening that we are all responsible for ourselves, and that I want to make sure that I'm showing up for myself as much as I am for anyone else, and carving out time to take care of myself, I think is a big priority in 2022. And I want to focus. I want to do less multitasking, more monotasking, more choosing things from a place of love and vision instead of from a place of fear and security, and seeing what can open up for me when I move through the world from a place of believing that I am okay and I am safe and I am loved and I am capable of having my wildest dreams, because this past year has been a very special one, and I'm hoping to carry that energy forward. And I invite everyone to join me in embracing the joyful unknown that is the new year ahead.
Oh, I love that phrasing, like focusing on love and vision instead of fear and insecurity. That's beautiful and perfect.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
our next question is from Nam, who asks, I am personally working on boundaries professionally and personally. How do boundaries fit in with your journey of self-love?
I think Valerie and I did a really great job of touching on this, but what I'll say is that boundaries are the ultimate indicator of self-awareness and self-worth. Until you set them, the message you're telling the world is, I don't know who I am and I don't value who I am either, because I'm just going to be at the mercy of whatever happens to me. So boundaries is how you decide what you want your world to look like and how you want to feel as you move through it. So take it through that lens. Like if it's work wise, is work ruling me? Am I, working to live? What is the relationship there? And how can I shift it so that there is some inkling of a human being being factored into that decision-making process around work? And similarly with personal life, I think a lot of us are intrinsically givers, which is beautiful, but relationships need to be balanced and in alignment, because alignment, I think, is really a precursor to feeling fulfilled, not just within yourself, but also in your relationship. So boundaries help achieve alignment. So think about it that way as well.
Our next question is from Madison, who says, I struggle with confidence. At work, my managers give me great feedback, but it always feels as though I'm behind and incapable of catching up. Though I know I'm not, it's impossible for me to register it emotionally. Do you have any advice?
So I used to feel very similarly, where I always felt like I was behind and that what I wasn't doing was enough. And I implemented this practice where every night before I went to bed, I said to myself, I always do my best. And I end the day from that place of knowing that I never do less than my best. It's who I am. And that doesn't mean I can't do something differently tomorrow, but it means that I am going to sleep from a place of self-love and self-worth instead of constantly feeling less than, and really abandoning myself because I haven't met someone else's expectations. So shifting that conversation from one where the criticism determines how you feel to one where the criticism might inform what you do next, but doesn't actually inform who you are.
This is great advice. Sorry. Oh, I'm just like taking mental notes. So
Yeah.
our next question is for both of you, and it's from Evelyn, who asks, how does self-love influence your respective creative jobs? You, Valerie, as a songwriter, and you, Melody, as a poet. Maybe let's begin with Melody for this one and then go to Valerie.
Um, the fact that I'm writing at all is the most beautiful embodiment of my self-love, because when I wasn't pursuing my career from a place of self-love, what I was a litigation attorney who spent many, many hours just calculating other lawyers' billing practices. And it was very lucrative, and my ego loved the prestige. It loved my office on the 20th floor with an ocean view. It loved the salary. It loved the acclaim and the access and all the things that come with a high-powered career. But my true self, my me, the melody in me, couldn't sleep at night. I was hallucinating. And so I think it really comes down, self-love for me is what I'm doing in this moment. And like, what a gift to be where I am right now. And I will tell you that it's a journey, and where I am in 5 years might be different. And allowing myself that space to evolve and change and grow is, I think, what has allowed me to get here, is not feeling like my identity is locked in stone and that once I make a decision, I'm stuck with it for life. So I'm sharing my self-love career with you. Thank you for making it possible. When you buy my book, you're validating me choosing myself. So thank you.
For me, I can relate to so many things that Melody has said in our conversation. For example, I believe that every life has a purpose and everybody came to earth to share a gift, and that no gift is the same. Even if it looks the same, it's something different about every gift. And so, as a singer songwriter, a poet, an artist, an illustrator, a dancer, all of the ers that I am, I can't put a limit on my creativity. There's a beautiful song that Gillian Welch and David Rawlings sang, and they say, I'm gonna do it anyway, even if it doesn't pay. I started singing and being a creative from the day I was born, and I'm gonna do it. No matter whether it's my job or not, I'm gonna do it because that's what I love, and that's what makes me see directly in my life how I'm loving myself. When I just spend the afternoon writing, reading, or playing guitar, I know that I'm giving myself a huge hug. So that's what creativity is for me. And everybody is creative. Even if you say, well, I don't play music, I don't sing, I don't do anything. Oh, there's something that you do. You cook, I don't, whatever it is, there's something that you do that's creative. So just tapping into that is a good way for you to realize that self-love it's always been there.
Mhm.
And then our next question is from an anonymous attendee who asks, for Melody, do you have a self-love practice that you do daily with your kids?
Mm.
And which could also be expanded out to how do you impart self-love practices to your kids?
So one of the things I love is using the time we spend together in the car to chat, and we play games, and the games change, but the nature of them really are the same in the sense that I'll be like, okay, what are you grateful for today? Or who are you grateful for today? Or what do you love about yourself? What are three things that make you very different than everyone else? And believe me, half the time there is like a fart joke inserted in the answer because, small kids, all you have to do is use the word fart and you have won the lottery of their hearts. Um, but what really moved me is we did this very early on where I said, tell me who you love. And we went in a circle and my daughter Violet said, myself. And so much of this is just, they learn it through osmosis. Like their mom writes self-love poetry. They each have their own copy. They read it, they talk about it, they tell their friends about it. And every single letter that is in this book is part of my parenting strategy. So every day presents an opportunity to talk to them about the value of having a dream, about the importance of forgiveness, about not feeling guilty and instead feeling grateful, about choosing your thoughts and having them be happy ones instead of painful ones. And, anyone who has children, when you do this work, what you're really doing is shifting your relationship, not just with yourself, but with your children, because as you embody it, they invariably embody it as well. So I would say the two things are I work on myself, it trickles down, it affects everything that I do. And more than anything, it affects how I show up for them. When I feel good about who I am, I'm happy, I'm present, I'm energetic, and they benefit from that because the alternative is for me to be depleted and angry and sad and broken. And tomorrow they're going to be adults and they're going to remember how I showed up and embody that as well. So my hope is that more than anything else, the more I can be in my worth and in my joy, the more they can learn to do the same simply by witnessing it.
And our next question is from Leslie, who says, during the pandemic, I felt isolated. I was working from home, I live alone, etc. How do I reintegrate myself into a more normal life as the world opens back up?
It's just so tough. I think we are all walking the tightrope of how do I keep myself safe and how do I keep myself sane? And I think we all need to find that personal balance, but do whatever it takes to actually get back out into the world. We can't stay in isolation forever. It goes against human nature. Like we are a species that loves to be social. And I would say for someone who's been alone for a long time, like a good place to start is on like a like-minded Instagram group, like mine, for example, and like finding people there who believe in the same things you do. And also being like, hey, we're in the same city. Let's go for a walk. Let's go to a museum. Sometimes you can transition that digital relationship into a real life one. I certainly did that with a friend that we were online friends for many years, and now we're more in-person friends than we are online friends. But it's really hard. I think this pandemic was the absolute hardest for people who were alone. And I think asking for help and reaching out to people around you, whether it's a neighbor, whether it's going to your local library or bookstore, whether it's simply like making eye contact with people on the street is a good step forward to like re-entering society and making those connections.
Our next question is from Vita, who asks, how can I determine what's self-love and what's toxic positivity? It's really difficult to tell the difference between the two on social media.
Mm-hmm. That's such a good question. And it's something that I have to check myself on regularly. And because yes, like we are, especially at a time like this, dealing with a lot of mental illness. And sometimes you can't just choose your happy thought. Like sometimes you can't show up in the world the same way someone else might who doesn't have things working against them. What I will say is you can always choose yourself and you can always work on yourself. And I think self-love is deciding that you are worthy of that exercise. It doesn't mean that you're going to be happy tomorrow, but it might mean that you sign up for a therapy session. It might mean that you talk to your doctor about how you're feeling. It might mean that you're honest with your friends and family about the fact that you're struggling and you ask for help. So it doesn't mean that you just show up in this fake, perfect, happy bubble. It's actually the opposite. It means you show up however you're feeling and you own that. And a lot of the book is about that. It's about, the whole emotional empowerment chapter is about feeling whatever you're feeling and doing away with these messages that are imparted on us in childhood, where it's don't cry, you're okay. And we kind of teach people at a very young age to swallow their negative feelings instead of feeling them. And a lot of the book is about doing that emotional accounting for yourself and owning what you find without shame. So I do agree with you that there is a lot of toxic positivity that's just bubblegum pink, which I am also very guilty of using that color. But I hope that when you look at the ABCs of self-love, you see that the entire book is devoted not just to happy feelings, but to claiming all your feelings and moving through the world from a place of wholeness instead of shame.
I think we have time for just one last question. This question is from Mark, and I realize I think this is an interesting one to end on, though it might be a bit tricky because it's very much been the subject of the conversation. But Mark asks, how do you define self-love for yourself? And I think it would be, why don't we maybe go Valerie and then end with you, Melody?
Okay.
Self-love for myself. It is embracing everything, all of the darkness and the light that I am, embracing that and looking at it and choosing to live in joy. It's a choice. And you know what? It's not always easy. And joy doesn't mean happy. And optimism to me isn't the easiest path all the time. The world can look at it and they can say, that person is oh so joyful and that just must be easy for them. No, it is brutal to look at this world and the darkness and the things that are surround us and bombard us every day, and to make the conscious choice to love yourself enough to not let that toxic energy in. And so it's a practice. I used to call it work, but I don't like that word.
Yeah.
I like the word practice. And so when you're practicing it, then you know that you're loving yourself. You can't even talk about it. You just know. So when you're in it, then you know. And you don't even have to, you kind of laugh to yourself about it. Like, okay, I'm doing it.
God, Valerie, that was so good. That is so good. And I'll piggyback off that, because self-love is not a destination. It's not something you check off your list and then you can be like, oh, another prize. I love myself. It is a journey and it's cyclical. And for me, it starts with self-awareness, like having the courage to know who you are. It's then, self-acceptance. It's accepting what you find, the good, the bad, the light, the dark. It's owning your worth once you realize who you are, the good, the bad, the light, the dark, and not seeking external validation to give you value and purpose. And then it's caring for that person that you've just discovered, that true self, and showing up every single day and figuring out, what can I do to honor her? That true, shameless, beautiful, complex person that I am. And some days it's easier than others. But like Valerie said, when you make that shift and you decide, you know what, I'm going to make self-love part of my daily practice, it opens you up and it invites other people in, and it allows for conversations like this one and communities like this one, where we are all beautifully abundant in our unique perfection. And that's really what it comes down to for me, is just like Valerie said, we are all here for a reason, and self-love is how we discover what that reason is and then share it with the world.
Thank you so much. This was such a fantastic, warm, open, generous conversation. To our audience, thank you for joining us tonight. Melody and Valerie, thank you so much for your time. This was just such a pleasurable conversation to listen to.
Thank you for hosting it. You are a very gracious and generous host.
Thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you, Valerie. I can't imagine having done this with anyone else. You're really just a super wonderful partner. Thank you.
Thank you too. You are my sister, kindred spirit, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, on that note, thank you everyone and have a wonderful evening. If you haven't already purchased the book, or books in this instance, I've dropped links in the chat. And on that note, thank you everyone and good night.
Thank you.